Hello, my name is Autumn Lily Faithwalker. I'm in 10th grade at Laurel, and I'm a member of the council here at the City Club of Cleveland. Today's City Club event is a youth forum titled Political Activism. In developing this forum, the council assembled a group of speakers that we felt would make this event an experience for you. Today's forum will follow the traditional City Club style. The first 30 minutes will follow a moderated forum style, and then after a mid-forum briefing, a 30-minute question and answer session with the audience will ensue. Today's panelists are Henry Gomez, the award-winning chief political reporter for the Northeast Ohio Media Group, with stories appearing regularly in the Plain Dealer and Cleveland.com. Mr. Gomez previously covered politics, local government, and business for the Plain Dealer. Matt Dolan, a Republican, is our second panelist. Mr. Dolan is a former member of the Ohio House of Representatives, representing the 98th District from 2005 to 2010. He resigned on January 2010. Matt is a product of Boston College and Case Western Reserve University. Our final panelist is Janine Boyd, a Democrat from Cleveland Heights. Janine Boyd is a representative of the 9th District of the Ohio House of Representatives. She is the daughter of Barbara Boyd, who held the same seat from 1993 to 2000 and 2007 to 2014. Thank you for joining us today. And without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to my fellow council member and moderator for today's forum, Nick Rutherford. Nick Rutherford.
Thank you, Autumn Lily, for that introduction. My name is Nick Rutherford. I'm a senior at Walsh Jesuit High School, and I'm the president of this year's Youth Forum Council at the City Club. Thank you to all of you for joining us, and for our three wonderful panelists for joining us today. I just want to start this off by having you all give a brief biographical account of your lives and how you became engaged in politics. So, Sport, if you want to start.
Sure. Good afternoon, young people. Thank you so much for having me. This is a wonderful honor for me to sit with you in place of the amazing and dynamic former Senator Nina Turner, who sends her regrets. There was a date change, and so that conflicted with her teaching schedule, but she sends her warm regards to you as well and tells me to tell you all, never give up, keep moving forward. I actually grew up in politics, as was alluded to in my description of me, and I ran from it like it was a house on fire for many years. I actually became a speech and language pathologist. My focus was, I had a twofold focus. I did research with Head Start. I graduated from Michigan State with my master's in speech and language pathology. And we did research with Head Start, specifically the over-identification of children in minority communities as having speech and language disorders or delays, when in fact they often had just dialectal distinctions. So they might say y'all or end a sentence without, or end a word without a consonant, and they're then identified as having speech and language disorders or delays, and that's not the case. We also furthered our research into children with sensory deficit issues, behavioral health issues. So a lot of kids, African American, Latino American, might be identified as having something called oppositional defiant disorder. And in fact, 5, 6, 7 years later, they're identified as having autism spectrum. And all that time has been lost. So I did that work, and I also served on a team working with kids with traumatic brain injury in the hospital setting, and I simply got upset at the way children in poverty who had additional or special needs, needed additional help, either in a medical or rehab setting, were treated versus children on private insurance. So that began that introduced me to the world of advocacy. I started to look for roles where I could use my child development expertise and advocacy so that I could help larger numbers of children get access to what they needed, regardless of their socioeconomic status. And so I found the role of advocate and coordinator for children with special needs at Head Start. I did that for 5 years, and then I went on and found a position at a place called Berea Children's Home and Family Services, now called Ohio Guidestone. I went after the role there of Director of Government Affairs and Public Policy, which allowed me to advocate and lobby at the state and federal level, so I did that. And then I was approached to run for city council in my hometown of Cleveland Heights by a dear friend who was suffering from cancer, and she knew she had limited time. And because of the voice I had developed for youth, she really encouraged me to consider her seat. I did. I was appointed in October 2012, and then I ran for her seat unopposed November 2013 and won. At that point, I knew people were looking at me and asking if I would consider running for my mother's seat. My mother is pretty amazing, and those are hard shoes to fill. She's been an advocate in her own right since 1985, when she was the first African American woman to be elected mayor of the city of Cleveland Heights. So I wasn't sure. We went to the Democratic National Convention in September 2013. Was it 2013 or 2014? What was the convention? I can't remember now. That was 13, wasn't it?
12.
Was that 12? Lord have mercy. Sorry, you guys. So we went to the convention in 2012, and I was just very moved. I was very moved by President Obama and a lot of the other speakers, and made my decision to really consider going forward with running for my mom's seat. So I did, and I won. I had a primary, and I beat my opponent by, I think it was, well, you might know better than I. It was like 70%, maybe 68% of the vote. And I'm there now at the State House. I'm on 3 committees: education, a new committee called Community and Family Advancement, which touches on, the primary focus of that committee is ending poverty, addressing the issue of cycles of poverty. And then lastly, I'm on local government, because I come from that as a city council person. So that's how I got here in politics, and I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Nick. Thank you, everybody, for having me. Again, Matt Dolan. I also have my parents to blame, but I didn't run away from it. So when I was 9, my mother ran for the local school board. And despite the fact that I have a reporter next to me, I will admit that was the first and only time I broke federal campaign violation laws. When I was going door to door, I put all our pamphlets in the mailbox, which is a no-no. But what attracted to me at being a competitive kid and growing up in athletics, the idea of wins and losses was really what first attracted me to politics. Well, my mom lost that election, and I subsequently have run and lost elections. But it was watching them be involved in the community that ultimately got me really involved in public service. So the competition to get the office was, quote, the fun part. But the reality of what you could do while in office, but maybe even more importantly, what you can do while you're not in office to impact your community. So it was really just this idea of being involved. As I matured, the best advice I've gotten, and I've given it over and over, is pay attention to what you like to do. I may sound old here, but I look around the room, somebody might recognize this, but we used to get a morning newspaper every day. And ask yourself, what did you read? What do you read first? Or when you open your computers and you go to a website, what is it that you open up first? And I found myself reading, I was a traditional boy, I read a lot about the sports, but I also found myself reading about government and became fascinated with how government works. And as I got along in school, the classes that I found myself enjoying the most, doing the extra work, getting involved in clubs such as you folks are in, were all civic related, all government related. So it also, not only did I find the idea of winning and losing in a competition attractive, but I found the idea of being involved in areas that I liked and was interested in, and thought I could add 2 cents to the discussion, very attractive. And then at the end of the day, I also am trained as a lawyer, and I watched my father make his start and grow up as a lawyer. And what attracted me about what he said, what do you like the most about being a lawyer? And he says, because every conversation starts with, how can I help you? And that resonated with me. And so the combination of what I like doing, what was a passion for me, and that I realized that most of my conversations can start with, how can I help you? Made me attracted to the public service and the political world.
So I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. I'm not a politician, but Youngstown was such a great political, and still is such a great political town. There's so many political characters. When I was growing up, we had a congressman who you may have heard of named Jim Trafficant, who ended up, it's exactly laugh, because he ended up going to prison for federal racketeering charges. But he embodied the good and bad of politics in Youngstown. And I guess I always seemed to be on some sort of path toward either politics or journalism. I was on the school paper when I was in high school. I was on the speech and debate team and was an extemporaneous speaker where you have to talk about current events somewhat intelligently, and I seem to be able to pull that off. And if you can pull that off, you're either going into politics or writing. And I hated losing, so I ended up, for me it was gonna, Matt talked about winning and losing, and I was really worried about the losing, so I decided to gravitate more toward reporting and writing, and writing about the winners and the losers. And I went to Youngstown State University and majored in political science and journalism. Took a lot of poli-sci classes. Even spent some time, helping out local candidates, on a volunteer basis. But really had a very inspiring professor in college who, thought that my talent was more in writing. I got some really good internships, had a lot of people help me along the way, and I've been here in Cleveland now for, I just celebrated my 10th anniversary with the Plain Dealer, now known half as Northeast Ohio Media Group. And I've been covering local politics in some form or another since 2007. I started out covering the Cleveland City Council and the Cleveland Mayor at City Hall. I covered Cuyahoga County government and the transition to this new form of government with a county executive and a county council. And then since 2011, I've been covering state and national politics. I covered the presidential election in 2012, got to go to both conventions that year, the Republicans and the Democrats. And this year I'm spending a lot of time preparing for the 2016 elections, because it's never too early. And really just looking forward to talking more with you today about politics, not necessarily the activism part, since that's not what I do, but public office and all that good stuff. So thanks for having me. It's good to be here today, Nick.
So Mr. Gomez hinted at this. The real reason we're here today is to talk about politics and what students can do to become engaged and informed in politics. So what is each of your perception about where the youth is now in politics and why it is important for the youth to be more engaged and more informed in politics?
You first.
Start,
So it's very impressive when I see youth who are involved, because when they are involved, like you guys, you are engaged, you are active, you're seen, you're visible, you ask tough questions, you stay consistent. I would say where I am concerned is that there's not as many of you as I'd like to see. And I almost want to ask you, when you talk about politics to your peers who aren't in clubs and groups like this, what's the reaction that you receive? I'd be interested in knowing that. What can we do to help you really inspire and motivate your peers who aren't in this room or who aren't as interested? What can we do to help you grow your numbers? Because you do certainly count, and you are more effective than you know. You're more influential than you know. I was in this room just last month with our new Speaker of the House, Cliff Rosenberger, and there were some young high school students here as well, and they asked him a really important question. They asked him, what are you going to do to help keep college tuition affordable in our state? And I can tell you, being on the budget, being in the state budget process right now, we're missing some things. There are things that are not being done that can be done. And the more of you that are involved in that conversation, who are headed off to college and are going to have either student loans or have to work to be able to afford, not only your tuition, but your books and your housing and your food and everything else. I mean, this is hugely important to you. This is right in front of you. And the more engaged you are, the more possible, the more possibilities there are in crafting policy that will really help you be in affordable schools. Having affordable tuition. So I feel like I am so inspired and so happy and so grateful when I see you. I wish we could triple you. And I would like to participate in ways to do that. I'd like to learn from you on ways to do that, because you have no idea what a difference you make. I watched the speaker try to answer that question, and then I've gone through the budget process so far. It's now in the hands of the Senate, but we've had it since February. And I can tell you we are missing opportunity to make schools more affordable for you. So the more engaged you are, the more possible that is.
I'm going to interpret the question differently because we're throwing around the word politics. And I opened my introduction by saying I like the wins and the losses, and that's politics. How to win a seat, how to maintain that seat. But I'm not sure that's where I would encourage each of you to get started. I would turn it into public service, community involvement, because the best way you ultimately can be in politics is to understand the community and the issues that the community you live in, the issues that impact all of you. So being engaged, the simplest way at this age, as you become 18, is to register to vote, and to encourage everyone at your age group, encourage those in your family, register and participate in the process. If you want to be involved in that process, get to know your community. And your community for a while may be your high school. It may be your college and the issues that impact you there. But if you are involved and engaged, whether you are on student council, whether you run for council, government in the college, or you ultimately serve as an elected official, you are not precluded from being involved in your community and having an impact on your community. The more you are aware of the issues that affect your community, the more you're going to find the outlets for change. And hopefully some of you will think the outlet for change is to run for public office, because then you have a purpose while you're there. Others might decide, you know what, education's really important. I see some members from Cleveland State here, and I know the two of them. They are very involved in making sure that Cleveland State represents a good education at affordable level for the people of Cleveland and for Ohio. But neither one of them holds elected office, but they're extremely involved in the issue that Representative Boyd just mentioned. So again, I think it's great that you're here. And I think the first demonstration of the politics is to register to vote. The lasting impact you can make is to know and get involved in your community. And then you decide what outlet for change you think is best for you.
Yeah, this is going to sound sort of cliche, but start small, dream big. I've been doing this as a reporter for almost 10 years, and one of the real neat things for me is to see somebody that was a grassroots volunteer or local organizer when I started this is now a candidate or winning an elected office. And nearly everybody I talked to on my beat in politics started out at that level, and a lot of them started out in high school as volunteers on political campaigns or getting involved in community activities. It's interesting. I started covering Cleveland City Council. Nick Martin, who's here today, was a staff aide at the City Council, and now he's the executive director of the local Democratic Party. And that's kind of neat to see, because there's these are sort of, I guess, my contemporaries age-wise, and I'm not totally an old man yet, but you gotta Matt had great advice in the opening. You know, what is it that you really want to do when you open that newspaper every morning? And please open a newspaper every morning, or read us on Cleveland.com if you wouldn't mind. What interests you, and then go, lean in toward that, because that's really how you're going to get to where you want to go.
So to vote, everybody has a certain basis of knowledge they come from, and unless you're one of those 1,000 people that vote for Mr. Potato Head every presidential election. But what would your advice be to help youth develop their own political beliefs instead of just inheriting their parents' ideologies?
So it kind of piggybacks on what both gentlemen to my left said, and that is reading. So, and absolutely Cleveland.com, but don't limit yourselves. I mean, there are some great, news outlets that talk about the world. One of the best opportunities and experiences I had was in political science in college at Hillsdale. I attended Hillsdale. Did you know that, Mr. Dolan? Yes, I'm a Hillsdale College graduate. That's a very conservative school. So, anyway, at Hillsdale in political science, we were required to get subscriptions to Wall Street Journal, and I still read it. It really keeps my eyes open to the world and what's happening in terms of foreign policy and all those sorts of things. And being involved, again, so now piggybacking more on what both gentlemen to my left said, listening to your families and your communities and what's happening with them, what are their needs, and if your community is your school or your neighborhood, but your families too. I mean, listen to what your grandmother might be going through with her Medicare. Listening to what if you got younger siblings and they experiencing bullying. Listening to and what inspires you, what moves you, and when you're reading articles about political situations or policy, what moves you? Is it local? Is it state? Is it national? Is it something related to youth? Is it related to jobs or education? What moves you? And then maybe have conversations with your parents, your guardians, your older siblings, your aunts, your uncles, whomever are the adults in your lives who have opinions that they're willing to share with you about why they vote the way they vote. And then talk and ask and share your opinion. Have those kinds of dialogues. Hilariously, when I went to Hillsdale, I was very widely encouraged by my family to go because I had grown up in a Democratic household. And they felt like I needed to see and hear and meet people who felt very differently about some of the same issues that I've already mentioned, and to learn to meet them halfway. And so it's good too to talk to people that don't agree with you. I mean, don't limit yourself to just speaking to people who agree with you. Talk to people with whom you don't agree. Listen to how they arrived at their positions. Talk about how you arrive at yours. That might really, what I found, my closest friends, who I'm still closest, my girlfriends and guy friends that I love from Hillsdale, is we don't agree on everything. Some things we actually do find a way to meet, and it's deep. It's amazing when that happens because they are very, there's absolutely no doubt that they are Republican, and there's no doubt that I'm a Democrat. But there are some really surprising moments where we are on common ground in our conversations. We've learned so much from each other getting there. So for sure, don't limit yourself to just listening and speaking with people who naturally agree with you. But I think starting with your immediate family and close circles, I think that's a good place to start, though. It helps you begin to really develop, your positions on different things. But again, don't limit yourself. Talk to people with whom you don't naturally agree. That's really important.
Well, first of all, as a father of 2 teenage boys, do not assume that your father is wrong. Give them a chance. Give your parents a chance. And I would echo Representative Boyd's. Find out how your parents came to the conclusions of where they are, and then for your own sake, constantly challenge your own thinking. The beautiful thing about being young in age is that the world is ahead of you. And the one thing about being a little bit older is you understand that the world is very fluid. It is ever changing. And that should also reflect a little bit in your politics. You know, what is important to you today may not be so important to you 20 years from now. But if you're sticking to your guns and say, well, I believe this at 20, therefore I must believe it at 40, you may not be doing yourself and those who you are serving in your community the overall best. I mean, Winston Churchill said it. He said, if you're not liberal in your 20s, you have no heart. If you're not 30 by your conservative, if you're not conservative in your 30s, you have no brain. I think what he was suggesting is that it is that times will affect your decision, but constantly challenge it. And by that, I think the advice from Representative Boyd is very good. We live in a society today where there is all kinds of ways to get news. And a lot of ways is very one-sided. And if you decide, I'm only going to listen to those people who agree with me, you are missing out on a big part of any argument or any solution to an issue. And I'll close this with saying I'm also a lawyer. And I can tell you that no good lawyer says whatever, you know, if I sit down with my client and I listen to their story, or if it's, whether it's, you know, an individual, whether it's a company, whatever it is, they have a story. And I would be doing my client a complete disservice if I didn't find out what the other side's story was. There's no way I could represent him or her, my client, if I didn't know the other side. And that should be true for you in your political beliefs. How can you be certain in your beliefs if you are not aware of the position on the other side?
I guess one more piece of advice to add to that is don't be afraid to be wrong. Be willing to be proven wrong. You know, I'm a reporter and I come at my work from a very unbiased point of view. But a lot of times even as reporters, we'll observe something and we'll think that what we've observed is the absolute truth, and then we'll be presented with a completely different point of view. And you have to be willing to admit that you can be wrong and that there are other points of view to things. The great thing about me being a reporter is I've been forced to feed myself a steady diet of all different sorts of opinions. When I was young and growing up, when I was in college, I had lots of opinions, and I was very vocal about some of those opinions, and I thought I had the world wired. And being a politics and government reporter has really forced me to seek out all different points of view. And when I report it to you, even though I've been accused of otherwise, I have to report it straight down the middle and give you the good and the bad and what each side is saying to help you try to make up your mind. And I think that's in the very base of what we all need to do when we're trying to inform our point of view, is to seek out all different types of point of view and seek out all different answers.
So we've talked about why it's important for high schoolers to be informed and engaged. But on the other side of the spectrum, how are politicians receptive to input from high school students and early college students?
I think, so I can't speak for everyone, but I can tell you that for instance, the freshman class of legislators that I am honored to serve among, we really seek out the thoughts and ideas of all of our constituents, but especially those in your age group and older. A little, you know, it's so important to hear from you. But again, I think it's very important that you stay engaged and that you know, if you get to go to local council meetings, if you go, you know, you get to do stuff like this, I think the more you do it, the better. And the more of us elected folks that you meet and build relationships, the better. Because speaking for myself and I think safely for my freshman class, my peers, we have interns in our offices. Like we requested them, you know, we asked for them immediately as soon as we took office, and it's so important. And I actually asked for if I could get a second one for the summer, and I'm so excited to say I was able to. Because the more I hear from them, the more I feel like my any policy I write that affects them or their families, that it's just more, it's more rounded, you know. So I learn more from them, from you guys, probably than you learn from me. And I think, again, my colleagues that I'm new with, that the way they would feel very similarly. So.
The cruel reality is a lot of us won't pay any attention to you. Because if we want to be in public service, we have to win elections. If you're not registered to vote, your issues don't make it to the top of the card. I'd like to say as a representative, when I was in office, I recognized I served everybody. But at any moment in time when I'm running for office, we get a list of names. And I like to go door to door. And your name is on that list if you're registered to vote. And I will show up at your doorstep. You have an issue, we talk about it. You can decide if I'm for you, if I'm against you, we can work it out. If your name's not on that list, it means you're not registered to vote, which means I don't show up at your doorstep, which means you never have the opportunity to talk to me about the issues that are important to you because we never met. And then you didn't get a chance to exercise your vote. So the biggest way, and I'm saying I and we, but the reality is you want to draw attention to yourself as an age group, get your peers to register to vote. Be a voice. Whether you are a collective voice on an issue or not, that's up to you guys. But if you want to get the politician to stop at your door, if you want to have an issue be paid attention to, make sure that you're impacting that person's ability to get elected or not. And if you're not, they don't have to pay attention to you. If you are, we do, and if we do, you get to decide whether I serve or not. Because that Dolan guy, I agree with him, I want him back. Or I don't agree with him, I like his opponent. That's the power you have by one simple gesture. Register to vote. You'll get all the attention you've ever wanted from politicians.
And not just register, but turn out to vote. I mean, it's the 18 to 24-year-old demographic is notoriously the lowest turnout demographic. And I agree with what Matt said. I mean, it's cynical, but it's not what Matt said is cynical. I guess what I'm about to say is cynical. It's not on them. It's on you. You want their attention. You want their ear. You've got to show them that you deserve it by voting. And
thank you to all of you. That is going to conclude our moderated portion of today's event. So I'm going to hand it over for the mid-form announcements. At this time, if you could all formulate questions for the question and answer period that will proceed.
Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Harris, and I attend John Hay Early College as a sophomore. Today, we are enjoying a youth panel discussion on political activism featuring Henry Gomez, Janae Bold, and Matt Dolan. Our moderator is Youth Forum Council President Nick Rutherford, a senior at Walsh Jesuit High School. We encourage you to formulate questions for our panelists now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. Our microphone holders are Ava Levine and Josh Rominski. First question, please.
Well, actually, I have a question while you guys all formulate your ideas. With the increased role of social media and just the saturated media market, how do you guys see that factoring into the youth's political ideologies and political activism? And how do you think it should factor in?
Well, it's definitely a very effective tool that I've seen first, you guys use, and more all of us are using it so we can communicate more quickly, and also, with all the generations after ours. So it's definitely a very effective tool for communication. I would say you're limited in what you can communicate on those things. I mean, if it's Twitter, it's how many characters, right? So you still want to know the whole story. I wouldn't base a decision just on something I read on Twitter, because it's usually just a soundbite. It's just a small piece of something that's going on. So I think it should inspire you to read more and learn more, investigate more about whatever the topic you've read about is. But use it as a tool. I mean, use it to get your message out, about a candidate or an issue. In our county, we have the Health and Human Services levy. That's a huge issue for our county. There's school levies. There's all sorts of opportunity to get your message out using the tool of social media, as well as about candidates that you are supporting or not supporting for whatever reasons. It's a huge communication opportunity. But just be sure you don't. I would encourage you not to base, your decisions on something briefly that you read on social media. I would really, if it says something and you're not sure about it, or it's interesting to you, investigate it further. That's what I would encourage you to do.
Well, I agree. Social media has pluses and minuses. Plus is that it can make government and public service more transparent, because we can immediately inform constituents about how we're voting, or we can put constituents on notice that there's a big issue coming up. Give us your thoughts, and you can get some immediate feedback. I think the negatives are laid out pretty well. It's insufficient information. I think the anonymity of social media creates a little bit of negativism and cynicism, and people get a lot braver behind their screens than they ever do face-to-face. So I think the aura of negativism permeates throughout, which I think is wrong. But if I can expand that, one of the things I get a lot is that in politics, it's all so negative. In every campaign, it's negative. And people are always saying how bad the other guy is rather than saying what I'm for. And that's all true. But the reality is that is the kind of messaging we respond to. And I always say it this way, that everyone here knows Coke and Pepsi. Mm-hmm. Now, and Coke and Pepsi run ads. And a lot of times they're saying, we're pro-Coke, we're pro-Pepsi. And a lot of times they're like making fun of the other guy in some cute, funny way, which everybody's laughing at. Now imagine if Coke and Pepsi were told that you have a chance to get 100% of the market on one day, and if you lose on that one day, you can't have your product be sold for the next 4 years. Do you think the ads that Coke and Pepsi would run would be cute little funny ads? I mean, they would be very aggressively telling you why Pepsi or why Coke is bad for you. So the reality is we, the collective we, respond to that type of advertising and that type of cynicism. My hope is as your generation emerges and becomes less reliant on some of the mediums that I grew up with, traditional news on TV, traditional newspaper 7 days a week, you can change the tenor a little bit of how we communicate with each other about politics. Demand what somebody's for and not rely on what somebody's against.
Yeah. I think that social media actually is a really great way of sharing information, sharing news stories. When I look at the numbers of who is reading my stories or how they're sharing my stories, a large number of it comes through Facebook, more so than Twitter, which I prefer Twitter to Facebook, but my stories are being shared more on Facebook than on other social media sites. And so for when it comes to trying to get your peers excited about politics or government, sharing stories that way I think can be very effective. I do think that we kind of tend to always think that the next big technological advancement that young people are into is going to be the one thing that finally gets young people to get into politics or buy newspapers, and it doesn't always work out that way. But I do notice that sophisticated political campaigns really are figuring out Facebook and figuring out Twitter, particularly Facebook, because it's a way that they can learn more about you. Now, might be a little bit of a creepy Big Brother type thing, but it is. They are. If you follow a politician on Facebook or start engaging with a political campaign that way, they're tracking your habits and they're finding out more about you, and that helps them gear up a political pitch to you. That helps them decide whether or not they need to call you or email you or send you a message in the days before Election Day or during the early vote campaign to find out if you voted yet. Do you have a plan for early voting? And I think that is going to become a huge battleground in politics of the future, especially the campaigns that are really good at analyzing that data. So you in a way, if that's how you choose to engage with your politicians and your elected leaders, that is potentially one way that they're going to become more engaged with you and more responsive to you. So I think there's some potential there for sure.
Thank you. We have a question right here in the front.
Hi. So recently in my history class, we've read George Plunkett of Tammany Hall and his opinions on many things. And one of the claims he made is that reformers are morning glories, which means they don't last for long, and that change is not a permanent thing, and everything will just go right back to where it is. And I was just wondering what you guys thought about how hard it is to make change in our government on the state level, on the local level, because no matter what party you're in, we are still in a system that's pretty concrete. Okay.
Anyone who wants to take it?
I see it a lot covering politics and government. I think if you get into politics, you are somebody that, not necessarily, I mean, there are a lot of narcissists in politics, not the people on stage, of course, but you have to have a very healthy ego to get into politics. And a lot of people get into it for the right reasons, or tell themselves they're getting into it for the right reasons, and they don't end up doing a whole lot to change the system. But I do see a lot of public officials that really are trying to do good work and really care about the reforms that they're trying to institute in certain departments. Sadly, my experience has been more with those who haven't succeeded, and we've seen a lot of that here in Cuyahoga County over the years. I will say that Ed Fitzgerald, who was the county executive, Matt was actually involved in that race. I mean, Ed got a lot of criticism over the last year plus of his term in office because he ran for governor and had some bumps in the road in that campaign. But Ed did bring about some reforms that I think were very needed in the county. I covered the county before and I covered the county after. And before, it was a mess. It was Tammany Hall. It was there was a lot of political corruption, and then a lot to really frustrate, I think, voters and citizens. And I do think Ed started the process of trying to fix some of that. And so in a way, it was covering that whole race with you in it, Matt, and with Ed, and with Ken Lancey, who's, wow, that guy was fun. But it was interesting to cover that, because people were trying to reform the system, and Matt also came up with some great ideas during that campaign that were interesting to cover. And so it'll be interesting to see what Armin Budish, the new county executive, does there. There's been some bumps in the road there, I think, but we've got this new reform government in Cuyahoga County. It's going to be very interesting to watch. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of the other side of things too, and it can be very depressing.
Change is hard in everyone's life. Just think of any time you go to a restaurant and you think, I'm going to try something new, and you end up ordering kind of the same thing all the time. Now in public service, when you're trying to reform big issues, it's very difficult because status quo is always welcomed by some. Some are benefiting from status quo. And when change is on the horizon, what do? They dig deep to protect what they have now, because change is uncertain to them. But I disagree with the premise of the author, because we're a country that's just been built on change. Maybe not as fast always as we've wanted it to, but you look at where we were, where we are, and hopefully where we're going. It's all based on change. This little, we're in a short, what I hope is a short period of time in our history where we're really against everything. And if the other side has a good idea, then we must kill it because it came from the other side, not because it was a good idea. While that existed all throughout politics, all throughout government, there's always been individuals who would rise above it from both sides and say, no, you know what, this is a good idea. Let's keep going forward with it, and let's take the arrows. So change is sometimes just slow. But I believe that we are a country that responds well, that when we see a problem, we fix it. It just, fortunately, not as quickly probably as we should.
So, and I would add that, to Mr. Gomez's point, there is a new county government system. So that is an example of change that did happen. You know, we used to have county commissioners, and now we have a county council with a county executive. That's an example of change that has happened. And it didn't happen overnight, as Mr. Dolan just indicated. Positive change a lot of times does not happen overnight. And Mr. Dolan did, I completely agree with Matt when he said, you know, that you definitely have people in, whether you're talking about your federal level, United States Congress, your state level, in your House of Reps and your state Senate, or in your county council or your council, your local councils. I'm sure everywhere there are definitely people who, you know, they're not going to accept an idea unless it comes from their, you know, their party or you know, their office. But there are absolutely those of us who just want to do some good for the people that are looking to us for support and help, and we don't care where the idea comes from. Let's just work together to make it happen. If it's you know, the thing that will be effective, you know, whether we're talking about making colleges and universities affordable, or you know, making job development more accessible, job opportunities more accessible, whatever the issue, affordable health care, whatever the issue. If there are ways we can make those things happen for citizens, there are a good number of us that are willing to, you know, stand up alone in our parties at first, but then try to build consensus. And that's, you know, that's part of it. It's part of what you do, is you have conversation after conversation, and you try to build consensus around something that that would work, that would help, and that would work. And that takes time. That is politics, just so you all know. That really is. It's conversation after conversation after conversation. It's building a consensus. So I'm not on the cynical side of that. I think it does happen. I think we do make change, but it takes time, and it takes building relationships and having all of these very sometimes lengthy conversations.
I think it's, just to piggyback on that, I think it's a good argument for young, it is really the argument for young people to get more involved, because while I do think that the new county government is a sign that there's hope and that you know, change doesn't happen overnight, one of the things about politics is it's so cyclical, and when you get in office, a lot of times you're thinking about running for the next office. And I've covered politicians who have compromised maybe what they originally believed in, and compromise isn't always bad, but you tend to make deals, or you tend to do something that you wouldn't otherwise, because it might help you achieve the next step. And yes, that's a cynical view of politics, but I've seen a lot of it happen, and I think that's why we constantly need new political talent coming into the pipeline, because you're the ones that can help as you mature and run for office and run campaigns, help keep some of these other guys honest. So.
Thank you. We have a question towards the center of the room.
Hello, my name is Deasia, and I attend the Cleveland School of Science and Medicine at John Hay. So today's forum, we've talked about political activism and the involvement of youth. And a touchy subject in the media has been police brutality. Mm-hmm. So my question is, how would you propose that the youth can make a difference in the issue of police brutality and profiling?
That's a beautiful question.
Whoever wants to take that first.
Well, making a difference on a practical level would be go to these community meetings and listen and meet the police officers who or demand that the police officers come into your community and meet with them in a non situation. I mean, just get to know them. so that everyone understands the community that they serve, and demand that from the community. I mean, as a politician who hopes to weigh in on that issue, community policing is where a big difference can be made. Is that we have to make sure that whatever community the law officer serves, it'd be best if that law officer was from that community. Second best is that law officer knows that community, and that likewise the community knows that person. So that community, not just for your own safety, but for information. Hey, guess what? I saw happening at the corner the other night. I didn't like it. Can you do something about it? It seems to happen at 11:30 every night. Well, then the police can plan their activities around it. As for the specific incident, as in any incident, and it's what I said before we all pass judgment, let's find out the facts and make judgment on the facts and not make judgments on what one side thinks the facts are. It's very difficult the more emotional and the more tragic an event is. But in the long term, if we're going to correct the behavior, we got to know the behavior that existed to be able to correct it.
So in Cleveland Heights, I started a mentoring and juvenile diversion program, and I deliberately involved my safety forces to be active participants for the purpose of building relationships with our youth. And what happened as a result of that was there were relationships established between police officers and some of our guys and our young ladies in our mentoring program and also in our juvenile diversion program. And they began volunteering for our safety forces. Nationally, in the summer, every community hosts a safety night. I'm pretty sure that's my loose recollection of the title. But it's where your safety forces are out either at a rec center or a local park, and the community is invited to meet the police. Some communities they grill out and have meals and snacks for families that come. If you find out about opportunities like that in your community, I would take youth and I would go. I would take some of your peers, your friends, and I would go, take your families. I would stay involved, and I would encourage you to start attending council meetings. I mean, that's in city council meetings. You have people who chair public safety. Those are the people that's the council person that's mostly responsive to public safety issues and community interactions with the safety forces. And get to know that council person and ask if there's things you can do. If you have a group of peers and you guys want to do something, meet your police bake sale thing or something like that. You think about something like that, you have an idea, I would share it with your council person, and that person, I believe, would be interested because of what's been happening. The communities where this has not happened, where these sorts of tragedies have not occurred, a lot of them have neighborhood police collaborations, so that what Matt just described is already taking place. Police they know the families know the police. We need more of that, and I first look to local government to do some of that, but I think we are at a place where it's critical. So if families and young people are interested in initiating that sort of partnership and community conversation, I say go for it. And so start with your city council and find out who is responsible or most responsive to public safety issues, and build a relationship with that person and talk about ideas.
Be a voice for reform when you see that reforms are needed. I'm not going to pass judgment on any individual incident, and there are a lot of them in the news right now, unfortunately. But in 2011, I spent a year with a colleague of mine, and we investigated the use of force activities in the Cleveland Police Department. And we found what we believed to be systemic problems in how the use of force was applied and how the administration disciplined officers who used excessive force. And one of the most surprising things about that series to me, and I'll confess one of the most disappointing things, was how little attention that series got and how few voices of outrage there were when we exposed some very significant problems in the Cleveland Police Department. And these problems, by the way, were mentioned by the U.S. Department of Justice last year when they released their report on the Cleveland Police Department, which came 2 weeks after the Tamir Rice case. Now, if reforms would have been instituted back in 2011, would some of these incidents that have happened not happen? You can't say that. But there would have been perhaps, we went to the same two people every time we wanted somebody to weigh in as the objective observer on one of these police practices, because no one in the community was raising a fuss about it. And now everybody is, and that's great. We need that discourse. But I'm saying, pay attention, stay informed, and when you see this stuff happening, be a voice for reform where you see reforms are possible and necessary.
Okay, I'm sorry. And just as when he says that, if you are like me, you might be thinking, how do I be a voice? I am an advocate by trade, and email writing campaigns to your city council people, your mayor, letter writing campaigns, the people we read. Elected people do read. You keep it short and to the point, what your concerns are, but those sorts of things are effective, or even phone calls, organizing your school, your class, or your organization to make phone calls to your elected person about the need for a reform, or to make sure we're paying attention to this latest tragedy and how, and considering ways to prevent future ones. Those are advocacy strategies that are you can access them easily. So those would be ways you can make your voice heard.
We've got a little bit of time left for one last question on the left side of the room.
Hi, I'm Mary Ellen Karras, and I'm the high school gifted coordinator and AP coordinator for Cleveland Metropolitan Schools. So I see we have a lot of students here today. I just wanted to say, Representative, that your story about entering Hillsdale and immersing yourself in a population that was primarily politically oppositional to your viewpoint, I really commend you for that. And piggybacking on the question that was asked 2 questions ago about reform, I came to City Club a couple of years ago when they had the government shutdown, and Representative Stephen LaTourette was one of the panel of discussion on the discussion floor. And he also spoke to us after the session, talking about the really strong bipartisan culture that is going on in Washington, D.C. now. And he claimed that he had left his office due to the fact that he felt political parties, Democratic parties versus Republican parties, could no longer do what you said, come to the middle, compromise, delve into a situation, and reach a mutually agreeable decision. And that so frustrated him after seeing that happen successfully over the years that he decided to leave office. So my question is, do you see that happening in government today? Because a couple of years have passed, and I was just curious as to the type of discussions that ensue when you're dealing with maybe a hot topic on the various committees you serve, and how does that get resolved, or do you see what Representative LaTourette was saying still in government today?
And due to time constraints, if you guys could all have your responses to about a minute or less.
Sure. Yes, we do. Yes, that's still an issue. Absolutely. It's what Matt was referencing earlier, that there is a divide on certain issues. And some of them we're not going to, some issues, I'll pick one, abortion. That's not going to, nope, if you're on one side of that, you're not going to budge. If you're on the other side, you're not going to budge, But what we can agree upon are things like education, making sure people, know what's available to them, and making, sure that people feel supported through whatever decision is facing them. we can agree on things like that, but we're not going to budge on either side of those things, for instance. And there are people, I know some really great legislators who do a really great job of reaching across the aisle that are considering, not continuing, because it is hard and it can be very discouraging when you have an idea or some policy, some legislation that you knew would appeal to both sides, and it's not supported because of whatever else might be going on politically, at the time. It can be very frustrating. It can be very discouraging. I think one of the benefits of having attended a school where I was the true minority in many ways was that you learn not to take it personally, and you remember why you're there, and you just take one day at a time and just do the best that you can. But it is definitely still an issue, I would say, at the state and federal levels.
And if you two could just put a brief input onto the
Yes,
question.
it's still a problem. Hope's on the way. We're going to vote on redistricting. And what that would do is make the competition for jobs more competitive and hopefully more partisan balanced, which means the elections are more about partisan balance rather than if you win a Republican or Democratic primary, you're automatically going to win in November. Thus, you don't have to pay attention to the middle.
And I'll leave it to the two experts here. I mean, there still are members who are known for pragmatism and reaching across the aisle in the state legislature. They're few and far between these days, and it's tougher to win re-election if you have that reputation. But I don't know. Matt gave one of the more memorable speeches in Ohio House history, and this is not an endorsement of Matt if anybody's listening, but I mean, one of the more fascinating Matt Dolan stories is when everybody else in his party was speaking, was battening down the hatches for an unpopular budget, he was seen as somebody that was willing to work with Democrats and voted with Democrats on a controversial budget, and there's not as much of that right now in the legislature.
Thank you to you three, and this is going to conclude our question and answer portion of today's forum, and I'm going to hand it over for our concluding statements.
Hello, my name is Kirsten Pamalas, and I go to school at Brexville Broadview Heights High School. I'm a junior, and so the City Club of Cleveland would just like to thank you for attending our youth forum on political activism, and we'd like to say a special thanks to our esteemed panelists, Mr. Matt Dolan, former member of the House of Representatives, Mr. Henry Gomez, chief political reporter at the Northeast Ohio News Group, and member of the Ohio House of Representatives, Mrs. Janine Boyd. We had a great time hearing all your thoughts, and this concludes our youth forum on political activism.